Hello, thank you for joining me again this evening. Welcome to my research commercialization channel. So, we're going to be discussing something very important, something very critical. That is probably one of those most important subjects you want to understand as a lecturer, as a researcher who wants to commercialize your research. Now, it's simple. While we keep talking about the things you must do, you've had a lot of things you must do if you've been following me. I thought it's important for us to now discuss what are the things you must not do? What are the things you must not do if you would like to successfully commercialize your research? What are the things you must not do? Right? What are the dons? What are the pitfalls in research commercialization? These are the points I want us to discuss tonight. I have about 12 points you want to focus on if you would like to commercialize your research. Let's get into it. Let's get into it very quickly. I'm going to share with you about 12 principles, things you must begin to avoid if you want to commercialize your things you must begin to pay attention to if you must commercialize your research. I hope you're ready for that. Number one, I'm not going to take your time. I'm going to jump right into it. First of all, let me just say, if you're a researcher, you should be positioning your research to solve problems in the society. In other words, you should do research that should solve problems in the society and for which purpose people would see value and give you something in return. And that is research commercialization in a nutshell. Let your research yield technological advancements that will then determine purchasing decisions, drive purchasing decisions. That's it, right? By you identifying value drivers, things that will make people to see value in what you have invented with your research. That is it. That is it. So, what are the things you must pay attention to? Things you must not do. Number one is please avoid doing research for the sake of research, for the sake of publication, mere publication. No, no. 1,000 times no. Your research must be problem centric. Your research must be problem centric. So, one pitfall is what lack of problem centric research. Your research must be about a problem that you should be solving. I understand how that you want to do, basic research and all of that. But look. If you live in Nigeria, if you live in the developing world, sub-Saharan Africa, your research, for the most part, should be about a problem in the society that you are solving. Today, I'm privileged to be working with a number of Western, researchers, trying to help them to commercialize their research in Africa. In Africa, so you can imagine that researchers outside of the continent are still solving our problems ourselves. When are we going to be positioning ourselves to solve our own problems? When? When? So it's important that your research be focused on what? Solving problems that exist. So lack of problem-centric research is one difficult pitfall which you must avoid, And remember, we talk about demand-driven research. We talk about accelerated research. Now, these are situations where you're going to first of all identify a problem that exists in the society. Demand-driven approach is where you identify a problem and then you build your research based on that problem. Accelerated innovation, where you first of all identify a problem that the industry has, then you build your research based on that what problem that the industry has. That way, there is going to be a pool for the research outputs that will emerge from your research. I hope that makes sense. That is number one thing you must pay attention to. Number two pitfall is lack of adequate problem exploration. Lack of adequate problem exploration. Yes, now you have identified a problem you want to solve. But we see that lecturers, researchers, do not take out time to do adequate problem exploration. They don't. They don't. They just do, literature review, and that is it. And that is it. That is not enough. That is not enough. Actually, there are two approaches to problem exploration. But before I say that, remember that you cannot solve a problem you don't understand. This is something we must understand. You cannot solve a problem you don't understand. So for a lot of these researchers, they just merely, do extensive literature review based on published articles. That is not sufficient if you want to really solve a problem with your research. The first thing you do is what? Secondary research. Secondary research is for you to explore already published information with respect to the problem that you want to solve. Remember, secondary research goes beyond literature review. Literature review is just one aspect of secondary research, right? That is just an aspect of secondary research. There's a lot you need to know about the problem you want to solve that has not been published in the pages of journals. It's important to note this. So, what should you do? What you should then do is to browse. Just check on the internet, Google it, understand what are the other dimensions to this problem that you want to solve. If this problem perhaps has been solved before, you're not going to really know by just doing literature review. However, if you Google it, you're likely to identify something on the internet, some blog that have carried it, some Facebook page, some LinkedIn page that's carried the intervention that has been earlier carried out with respect to the problem you're trying to solve. That way, you don't reinvent the wheel. You don't waste your resources, and you then know how best to adapt your research accordingly. Yeah, so that is secondary research. Right after that is what we call primary research. Again, we don't do this enough or well enough, right? So primary research is where that now that you have understood the context of the problem and what is known about the problem, that is secondary research. You then do primary research. You must do primary research. You must identify the people whose problem you want to solve. The people whose problem you want to solve. Very important. When you identify that, that is what empathy research, where that you now put yourself in the shoes of these people. Talk to them, go and talk to them, go and talk to them, go and talk to them. Understand what they think about the problem, understand what they feel about about their problem, understand their pain points, understand their frustrations, understand how they're cutting corners today to solve this problem, understand the factors that influence this problem, that trigger this problem. If you don't put yourself in their shoes, if you don't understand this problem to the extent that you should then go ahead and to solve it, without any ambiguities, then it's going to be difficult for you to really come up with a solution that would yield the order of magnitude required to solve this problem eventually. Yeah, this is what leads to researchers finishing their research, and then whatever product, whatever outcome will remain in their laboratories. Those days are gone. Please, please. Now you want to do research that has a meaning. You want to do research that has a target, that has a focus. Please. Right. Now, this is something you must avoid. You must avoid doing research without adequately exploring the problem. Right? So primary research must be done. This is not something you're going to just do with mere questionnaires. We're talking about empathy research. We're talking about ethnographic research, where you're going to go to the people that own this problem and observe them and talk to them. Right? Put yourself in their shoes. Very important. Very important. Researchers hardly do carry out adequate problem exploration. Now that leads us to number 3, which is ignoring intellectual property. Ignoring intellectual property protection. Ignoring adequate intellectual property protection. Right. Now, see, researchers must understand that what they do is actually supposed to be innovative, right? Innovative. They're supposed to come up with inventions. They're supposed to come up with very new novel technologies for the most part, right? If that is the case, then they should understand the principles of intellectual property protection. But they ignore this. They ignore this. They ignore this. The sad reality is that you have more researchers in the diaspora who have intellectual properties, that is patents, in Nigeria than the Nigerian researchers, right? So most of the patents we have in Nigeria are from the diaspora, I find that is funny. That is funny. It just shows that we have researchers who do not understand intellectual property protection. So for your research, for your novel research, for your inventions, you must protect them. You must patent them. Very important. Very important. And you must do this before public disclosure of your technologies. You must do this before public disclosure. Actually, in Nigeria today, the grace period is 6 months. So if you must publish your article, if you must go to present it in seminars, you have about 6 months to have what? To file it, to file it, to file it, to file it for protection. To file that patent, you have just about 6 months. So you must know that public disclosure is not right until you patent your technology, right? So most times you avoid, you don't pay attention to intellectual property protection, and that is a pitfall. That is a pitfall. That's number three pitfall. Then number four pitfall talks about what now? Poor knowledge of institutional intellectual property policy, and also alongside that is your weak intellectual property policy, your weak intellectual property policy, your weak IP policies in your institutions. As you're listening to me now, it's possible you have not read your IP policy, the IP policy of your school. In fact, I can argue that 98%, if not 99% of lecturers in Nigerian universities have not set their eyes on their IP policies. Yes. Is that serious? Then how do you intend to commercialize your research? Yeah. So poor understanding of your IP policies is a problem why you may not end up commercializing your research, because you need to understand, what does my institution say about my IP? What what does my institution that owns, your institution owns your IP, right? Good. So what does it say about it? How much of these efforts belong to me? How would my institution compensate me? If you don't know these things, it's difficult for us to have that conversation around commercialization of your research, right? But what makes it worse is that most IP policies are so weak, are so weak, are so weak. And most schools must begin to revisit their IP policies if they want to incentivize lecturers to commercialize their research. Please. And that is number four's weakness, and that's number four pitfall, and they don't in research commercialization. So let's go to number five now. We talked about underestimating market research. We don't do enough market research as researchers. We don't. We just go ahead, do literature review, just go and do what we want to do. No, that's wrong. That's wrong. If you want to solve a problem for the market, then you must do market research. As a matter of fact, every postgraduate student, especially PhD students, must master market research. You must do market research. You must understand market research. It should be a compulsory course, because if you don't understand the market that you want to delve into with your solution, then how can you fit in with your solution? How can you fit in with your solution? You must understand the demand, you must understand the supply, you must understand the system, the market forces involved. You must understand who the competitors are. You must understand the existing products. You must understand how this problem is being solved today. Okay, understanding all of this will help you. What is the existing business model involved in this? What are the deficiencies of this market? Understand the inadequacies of the market. If you don't, it becomes very difficult for you to push in a research that would fit in eventually for this particular market. That is something I believe every researcher should pay attention to. You must pay attention to what market research. You adequate market research along the same time that you're starting your research, it will give you a lot of insights into approaches, what exact objectives you should have, what exact research questions you should have. Okay, very important. Now that takes us that's a very important pitfall. That's a very important pitfall. So that takes us to the next one. The next one talks about weak business modeling. Weak business modeling and business planning. Very important. Very important. If you understand that this solution that is going to emerge from your research should be a business eventually, then you want to pay attention to how this would really work as a business. How will it work as a business? What will be the revenue streams? People do research and then they come up with they finish, then begin to think of how this can become a product to solve people's problem. But they come to understand now that nobody is willing to pay for their product. If they understood it that earlier, they would have retargeted, refocused their solution, their research. Very important, very important. Talking about business planning, talking about business modeling. Who are you targeting to solve their problem? What is the size of the market? What are the channels through which you're going to reach the people you want to solve this problem for? Do you have access to them? Are they well funded? Is this a compelling problem for them? Right? Understand, how would you go ahead to pushing your product so that they will need it, they will prefer it to the alternative, because there's a way they're solving this problem today. So these are the things. What is the purchasing power of your of your customer segments? Market segmentation, very important. Now, this is it. You must have a very like a strong business model now, right? Thinking about how you're going to make this a viable solution, economically viable. How would you gain reward, gain value in return? Apart from creating value, how would you deliver this value and gain value in return? These things speak to the business model of the solution that is going to emerge eventually. So it's important you pay attention to this. So this is one pitfall: inability to pay attention to the business plan, business model of the solution that will emerge from your research. Important for us to mention this. Now, that takes us to the next very closely related one, which is what weak operating model. Okay, so we have with the weak business model, you will have a weak operating model. Most times, especially for spin out, right? For spin out. Also, by the way, if we're talking about business model, it's also for spin out. So for this your spin out, you should pay attention to the operating model. How will this run itself? How will this run itself? Most times we don't pay enough attention to this. How will this business run? How will this business run? What will be the source of the raw materials? Perhaps. Okay. Do you think this is something that can scale? Okay, this is important. Is this something you have the ability to actually execute? We're talking about operating plan now. Most times we don't have a strong operating model, operating system. How would this work? How would this work? How would this work? What elements will you add together to make sure that we have a system that can execute the solution, your innovation by the end of the day? We don't think about this well enough. At some point in your research, as you start having a direction to how and where you're headed, what you're supposed to do now is to begin to plan out an operating model, a strong operating model, which your solution eventually is going to adopt and run with. Very important that you pay attention to this. People have finished their research and then they begin to think, oh my God, to execute this is very, very difficult. To execute this is very, very difficult. All right, no relevant partnerships that you can adopt into your business. Access to the resources just very far-fetched. You begin to see all of those jump to your face, but these are things you should have paid attention to earlier on while your research was still in progress. All right, so that is something to pay attention to. So that takes us to the next very important one, which is probably the most important one, which is what? Poor team management and poor team alignment. Poor team alignment, poor team management. This is the management principle in research commercialization. You don't pay attention to this. Remember, there are about and three stages with respect to research commercialization and team management. Number one is that core research group. That core research group. Your core research group is not going to be the group to take this to market. No, no, no. 1,000 times no. Right? So you have to be able to, once you come up with the concept, once you come out, your research is done, Then, in fact, the research shouldn't be done before you start engaging the commercial team. There is the commercial team you must pay attention to. These are the people, the young guys now that will take this product to market. Remember, between the research core research team and the commercial team is the institutional bottleneck which you must break. You must break the institutional bottleneck. You must address the institutional issues. But talking about team and talking about management of the team is important for you to understand that there are a number of things to pay attention to. Number one is you want to get the people that have the adequate competency, the required competency to drive this technology. Required competency at all levels, right? Get the advisory team that fits in. That's number one. Number two is it's always important for you to get people who have the required chemistry to work together, right? They have the required chemistry, they're aligned with their values. These are the people that can work together. It's not persons that, there's a lot of misalignment in their values. So this happens a lot when you don't pay attention to team composition. And also, when you don't realize that the people that did the research must not necessarily be the commercial team, right? So, please, it's important for you to align interests. And also, it's important for you to identify persons who you probably have that cohesion of working together with. If we have history of working together, and you've worked together with them in the past, people like that, it's good to work, identify such persons that have that cohesion to carry on with this research to push it to the market. See, taking innovations and infusing them into the market is not an easy feat. It's not an easy feat. So it's important to pay attention. It's important to pay attention to these people, understand what their interests are, and understand how best to align all of those interests to now compose a strong force that would go ahead to break the markets with your innovation. Very important. Very important. So that takes us to the next step. Usually, researchers lack the ability to tell their stories, to pitch their innovations, So, you see, I know you're a technologist, I know you're a scientist, but some of the commercial partnerships you're going to need for this your innovation to get into the market, they don't quite understand as much as you do about the science involved in this research, about the technology, or about the language that you use in your scientific world and all of that, right? You don't quite understand. So it's important for you to understand what interests them. It's important for you to communicate the right way. That's where also your commercial team comes in. So, but you must be able to pitch your innovation the right way. You must be able to know your numbers. You must be able to communicate if you want people to part their funding, you know, um, for this to really work eventually. So please, please, and please, pitching your technology is important. Pitching it the right way is important. Understanding the things that matter is important. Understanding the things that matter and being able to communicate them is very important, right? So that is an important pitfall, which I think I need to highlight. There is a way to talk about your technology, to tell the story behind your technology without making it look overtly, technical. Now that leads us to the next one, which talks about your poor licensing mechanism in your institution. Poor licensing mechanism. Your institution, the technology transfer mechanism and systems that you have in your institutions are very weak. They are very weak. They are very weak. From the disclosure of these technologies to the point of getting to market either a spin-off or licensing, that entire process your institutions must master and have very strong systems to execute them. It's very critical. It's very critical because these technologies don't necessarily, the ownership is not necessarily yours, though you're the inventor, right? So That means that your institution must play a very active and powerful role, a very critical role in saying that they get to the market eventually through the licensing aspects of it, finding out who exactly you should license to, drafting the entire licensing agreement, and following through with that, all the negotiation aspects. There are a number of loopholes that you find in licensing agreements. Your school must be able to have the right team to be able to what see through the lines and be able to negotiate adequately. Commercial evaluation, being able to identify the markets that are relevant, right? Technological evaluation, being able to say, okay, fine, this technology is going to fly. If this is the trend now, and it'll give you that advice that it is relevant for you to eventually what have an adequate commercialization strategy. So this is important. This is important that your school will have a strong licensing mechanism. So weak licensing mechanism for your institution is one pitfall. Is one pitfall in research commercialization, which we don't pay enough attention to. We don't pay enough attention to this. In fact, most times your institutions want to take a lot of ownership in this whole entire process. Technology transfer is something that schools, universities, polytechnics must master, must master. And there is even another aspect to this, which is what exit strategy. Exit strategy. Most researchers and their institutions don't have a clear exit strategy about the technologies, about the innovations they're pushing forward to the market for commercialization. They don't have an exit strategy. What is the natural history? What is the natural history of this technology? How would this technology eventually get the market and yield returns for the investors? Are you going to basically license this? Are you going to eventually sell this? Are you going to eventually do mergers and acquisition? Are you eventually going to have this run through the generations, right? Are you going to have this become go for an IPO, initial public offering, and all of this kind of stuff. So you have to have an idea of what am I going to do with this? Yes, I want to commercialize this, but what is the purpose eventually? What is the purpose eventually? How am I going to see that this technology gets to its end? What's the end I see about this technology? This must be discussed clearly. This must be there has to be a clear exit strategy with your technology. Very important. So the next thing I want to talk about is poor customer engagement. Poor customer engagement. Not carrying customers along. And this is also what we call co-creation. Co-creation. When customer co-creation, when you don't take customers along, you don't take their feedback, you ignore them, that is what a red flag. You must be able to, if you want to commercialize your research, you must be able to work with the customer. You must know how to carry them along. You must get to know how to take their feedback and improve on your technology. We call it customer co-creation. You must, at some point, once you're done with your prototyping, you must be able to engage the customers and understand what they think about the product, because they are the ones that will invest in this product financially and psychologically. So it's important for you to carry them along. How do you get the best out of research, out of the customer, in order to promote and enhance the quality and the outcome of your research, of your innovation? Very important. Very important. Right. So that takes me to the next one. I'm going to talk about your ability now to properly align your interests, your ability to properly align your interests and the interests of every stakeholder involved in your research. Researchers don't figure this out earlier enough. There are, you know, active players in your research most of the time. Technologists are there, your supervisor is there, the institution is there on one end, right? So all of these interests, how do you capture them clearly? How do you capture them clearly? And purposefully direct the course towards commercialization. This is something important. This is something important. So your ability to do this is something you must pay attention to in research commercialization. It's a pitfall most times. You see that, okay, my supervisor is not carried along and all of that, so just abandon the technology, move on. Or you begin to have issues with your, or you go ahead to do it without even carrying your supervisor along and all of those things. It's wrong. You must be able to carry every player along. The technologies are very critical aspects also in this, right? Very important. And this is also where founders agreement come in. You must know how to come up with a comprehensive founders agreement. This is one of the reasons why your research may not hit the market eventually, because you didn't start it well. There is no clear agreement amongst the co-founders. We call it what? Founders agreement. Very important that you understand this. Very important that you understand this. So that takes us to another pitfall. We talked about what? Poor prototyping. Poor prototyping. Poor application of the lean methodology in prototyping. So you see, if you would apply the lean methodology in prototyping and in your research process, you're not going to need so much funding to drive and to go to a long extent in your research commercialization efforts. So you see, most times we waste a lot of resources before we come to a point where our research is now making sense with a product output with a tangible value, right? So we waste a lot of resources. But if you will apply the lean methodology, if you will apply the lean methodology, where you come up with the right questions, gather the right ideas and build on that and get your positive feedback or your negative feedback and build on all of those, right? So if you will build incrementally, do your rapid prototyping and focus on what matters, and use your resources adequately per time for every stage. You know how best to use your resources. That would save you a lot of headache. That will save you a lot of headache. Most times, we have researchers who are waiting for the millions in order for them to take the next step. However, that's not really necessary. Sometimes you just need to do your rapid prototype, your sketching, and all of that to patent your technology, and from there, have ownership, and then go on to what raise the funding that you may require. And sometimes we also want to build so much per time. No, you build incrementally. You build, you test without spending so much. You build, you test, and then you move on to the next. But if you want to do everything at the same time, you may miss steps, and then it becomes difficult for you to go back to, you know, because innovation is iterative. It is iterative. You're going to go back and forth and all of that as you get information, as you get data, use that data to build up on the next step. Very important. Sometimes it gives you a negative feedback, you go back again. That is the way it goes. That is the way it goes. So it's important that you understand that your research commercialization effort has to be with a lean methodology while you work towards prototyping, okay, your product and doing your product development alongside your market development. You need to go step by step. You need to go step by step and be patient about the process. Very important. Very important that researchers will begin to appreciate. So sometimes they say, hey, we don't have these resources, we don't have this equipment, we don't have all of it. Yes, we know that. But if you would apply the lean methodology, the right prototyping skills, then you'll be able to make the most of the little resources that are available to you. Be able to make most of the little resources that are available to you. Yeah. This for me would be some of the pitfalls that you must avoid if you want to actually commercialize your research. Yes, most of them I've mentioned them in this. So pay attention. Ask yourself, okay, do I have a roadmap? Do I have a roadmap? Do I have a plan? Most times, if you don't have a plan, it's difficult for you to know where you're headed. So always have a plan. Always have a plan. Always have a plan. Okay. Don't go on to research commercialization without a roadmap in your head. Um, and of course, you go beyond your head to write it down. Write it down. That's what we call vision brief. Have an innovation vision. Okay, what we call innovation. Okay, it's an important principle. It's an important principle in research commercialization. So that's the last one I'm going to conclude with, right? The pitfall of not having a vision, of not having a direction, of not having a plan. Okay, yes. So these for me would be things that if you pay attention to them, you're likely not to arrive at the destination. But if you don't pay attention to them, you may become just a casualty of research commercialization, and you just end up publishing, and then you rob the world, the society, of that important and necessary solution to their problems. Thank you very much. I'll see you same time um, next week. Thank you.